What should you be eliminating from your life? My name is DJ. Got Loki over here too. Welcome to a special edition of Devotions. We are going to be taking some time over the next 10, 11 days, however many it ends up being, to talk more about that concept. So we are in my church entering into a time of corporate fasting. And so there's no prescriptive method that's used for this. I'm going to tell you about my method here in a little bit, but basically we're entering into a time of prayer and fasting and focus. And so for me, I have some very rather intense motivations here. And that is that I find myself in a crossroads in my personal life. Well, I should say more professional life than anything, but personal life is part of that too. And really kind of trying to figure out, okay, what's the direction here? Where are we going? There's a lot of things that are in that realm of possibility, I should say. In fact, I don't think I've ever had a time in my life where I feel there's more possibilities, which is a good thing, but it's also a little bit of a bad thing because what do I focus on? And so that's become the question that I'm asking myself. And I spent some time actually over the last 2 months, basically, with this question of, okay, what really is next? What's the focus going to be? Where are we going to be? And at the beginning of the year, or towards the beginning of the year, I was seeking out a word for this year. And the word that came to me was prepare. Initially, I thought that meant like teach people how to be prepared or, exercise preparedness. But the word is prepare. It's hard to gather what that's going to mean. I don't know. I don't think that's what we do when we're preparing. Or when we're prepared. We're not necessarily always knowing what's actually coming. We're just having a orientation towards that. And you guys have probably heard me talk about that before, I'm sure, if you've been watching this channel at any point over the last 2 years. You've heard me talk about the fact that we're not going to rise to the occasion. We only rise to our level of preparedness. And so this is something that has been on my mind for a long time, but this year I couldn't shake that feeling that was the word, even though I really, really, really didn't want it to be. I would really prefer anything else. And so this time of fasting is also a time of preparation for me, of extracting okay, what is going to be the direction? Sure. But moreover, the last couple days, I've had this somewhat overwhelming sense that I'm trying to do too much and that I have a lot of these ambitions, but I just simply cannot do all this stuff. It will just dilute whatever I'm doing. And so I've unfortunately come to this conclusion that I need to eliminate some things. In fact, a lot of things. In fact, I'm coming to the conclusion that I need to eliminate most things. So I spent all this time, even traveled to a location to just have that quiet time to figure things out and what my plan for the year was going to be. And the more I planned, the more frustrated I got. So it's pretty clear that I need to eliminate a lot of things about what I'm doing. So I guess next steps here is to go through this period of fasting. So what does fasting look like for me? Well, in my case, I am doing a transitional fast to water only, and then a transition back. And so when I say transition fast, I kind of define that as saying we're going to ramp down slowly, get to the point where you want to be, and then go back up again. And so you're making those transitions with purpose. And so for me, this has been eliminating some various things diet-wise. And so over the actually, I've been already kind of ready for this fast upwards of a week ago when I started eliminating some things like, processed sugars, carbohydrates, things like that. Now, didn't fully eliminate that until Sunday right before we started the fast. But each day I'm taking things down another notch. And so the first day was eliminating any carbohydrates, um, any kind of simple starches, any kind of things like alcohol or things like that is usually included in this kind of first day process. A lot of people will sometimes do the no coffee during the fast, and I am ramping down my caffeine intake. I'm probably still going to have some decaf coffee. I've got some reasons for that I can go into maybe another day, but there's some things I've noticed with me that coffee actually does help, even if it's decaf coffee. It's a little weird, but it's the thing. So I'll probably have a little bit of that as I'm processing downward, but things like that, you're basically just taking control of that diet process. And I've found over the years that the more I've done this, the easier it is. In fact, I am now passing 2 days into this and down to juice only. So juice and water. And when I say juice, I mean like good quality cold pressed vegetable and fruit juice, to be specific. I don't mean like going and getting a thing of orange juice off the shelf of the store and calling that juicing. I'm talking about actually good quality, very low glycemic index kind of stuff, because carbohydrates are really what have that kind of impact. Just FYI, that's what makes people fail at fasting more typically, is because they can't handle the sudden cravings, or the body is freaking out. And a lot of people unfortunately have this view of fasting that it's supposed to be suffering. And I say this a lot because it's true. Fasting, I can't find anywhere in the Bible that indicates that fasting should be suffering. Now, there are times where like we have in the story of Jonah, where the king decides to wear sackcloth and fast, and basically have a bit of a show is what he's doing here. And he calls the entire nation to do that. And so we have some examples of that kind of thing that was, not uncommon even in those areas, in the non-Jewish areas. So there's some interesting things with that, but ultimately there's not a lot of call for fasting to be suffering. It's more of obedience. And that's the key, is that really it's about obedience. So with that theme, and with the theme of elimination, what I wanted to do with the next 10, like I said, maybe 11 days, we'll see how we do, is to not only go on this journey with me and discover this, and I'll have a lot of shorts throughout this time, but I also wanted to read through a 10-chapter book. And one of the ones that stood out to me was Ezra. And that is because I have gone through studies of, I usually call it Nehemiah. It's actually not the correct pronunciation, I don't think, but I've gone through these studies before and I found them fascinating. And so I thought what I would do is go through a Bible project and do kind of a live reaction to this. And I've not actually watched this yet, but this is the Bible project for Ezra. We'll watch this together, and then we will actually go through Ezra chapter 1. So let's do this here.
The books of Ezra and Nehemiah. In most modern Bibles, these books are separate, but that division happened long after it was written. It was originally a unified work written by a single author. The story is set after the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem and its temple and took many of the people into exile. And this book picks up about 50 years later and tells the return of some Israelites to Jerusalem, and then what happened when they rebuilt the city and their lives there. Specifically, the book focuses on 3 key leaders who led the rebuilding efforts. You have Zerubbabel, then Ezra, and then Nehemiah. And the book's design focuses on the efforts of each leader. Zerubbabel leads a large group of people back to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple. Then about 60 years later, Ezra arrives in Jerusalem to teach the Torah and rebuild the community. And then he's followed by Nehemiah, who leads the rebuilding of Jerusalem's walls. And these three stories are designed to be parallel.
Okay.
Each begins with the king of Persia, prompted by God to send the leader to Jerusalem, and he offers resources and support. And then each leader encounters opposition in their efforts, which they then overcome, but in a way that leads to a strange anticlimax in each of the three parts.
Let's stop here. I'm curious who else knew that these were actually originally the same book or the same work. I actually didn't know that. So this is going to be fascinating to go through. I just wanted to say that really quick, but yeah, let's jump back into here.
Let's back up and see how it fits together. So the story begins with a decree from Cyrus, the king of Persia, and he's moved by God to allow the exiles to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. And the author says this fulfills a promise made by the prophet Jeremiah that the exiles would one day return to Jerusalem. Now, this fulfillment should trigger our hopes in the many other prophetic promises that exile was not the end of the story. We have hope for a future messianic king from the line of David. We have hope for a rebuilt temple where God's presence will dwell with his people. Hope for God's kingdom to come over all the nations and bring his blessing, just like he promised to Abraham. And so it's with all these hopes in mind that we read on into the story of Zerubbabel. His name means planted in Babylon. He represents the generation born in Babylonian captivity, and he leads a wave of Israelites returning to Jerusalem. After they settle there, they rebuild the altar for offering sacrifices, and later the temple itself. The foundation laying ceremony, and then the temple's final dedication, these are key moments. The past stories of the tabernacle and temple's dedication should be in our minds. This is when the fiery cloud of God's presence is supposed to descend. He's dwelling with his people, and it doesn't happen. And so while some people are happy about this new temple, the elders who had seen the previous temple of Solomon, they cry out in grief. It is nothing like their glorious past or their hopes for the future. And it's right here that we get the first story of opposition, and it's very odd. So the grandchildren of the Israelites who were not taken into exile, they had been living in Jerusalem all along, they come to offer help with the temple rebuilding. And Zerubbabel refuses. He says, "You have no part in our temple." And this, of course, generates a conflict, which Zerubbabel overcomes, but it's very strange, because the prophets had envisioned that the tribes of Israel would all come together, along with all of the nations, to participate in the worship of the God of Israel when the kingdom finally comes.
So we're getting our first instance of, well, maybe not first instance, but a little bit of gatekeeping going on here. I've been thinking about this in the church quite a lot lately, so we're seeing a lot of this is what it is and this is what it isn't, like that. Maybe one of these days we'll get into why we're, I think, being exposed to that language, but this is an interesting distinction between the way that the intention was and what actually happens, even in this case.
So this is an anticlimactic moment, to say the least. In the next section, we zoom forward about 60 years and we're introduced to Ezra. He's a leader among the exiled Israelites in Babylon. And he's a Torah scholar and a teacher. And so he gets appointed by Artaxerxes, king of Persia, to lead another wave of people back to Jerusalem. And Ezra wants to bring about spiritual and social renewal among the people. Our hopes are high. And again, we come to another anticlimactic moment in the story. Ezra learns that many of the exiled Israelites that had come back, they had married non-exiles who had been living around Jerusalem. Some of them were non-Israelites, and almost certainly some of them were. Ezra then appeals to the commands of the Torah, that Israel was supposed to be holy and separate from the ancient Canaanites. And he then says that the people living around Jerusalem are like the Canaanites. They're going to corrupt the exiles. So Ezra offers a prayer of repentance, and it's very heartfelt. But then he rallies all the leaders and enacts this divorce decree that says all these marriages should be annulled, the women and children sent away. And then the decree is only partially carried out. We're given a list of some of the men who divorced their wives. The story is very strange for a number of reasons. First of all, God never commanded Ezra to do any of this. It was the leaders of Jerusalem who led Ezra to make the decree. Second, the contemporary prophet Malachi, he did say that the exiles should care about purity, but he also said that God was opposed to divorce. And so the mixed results of the decree, this all fits into this pattern of a strange concluding anticlimax. Which leads us to the next section about Nehemiah.
So that's really wild. And so I think I'm going to stop here because we are not going to be reading Nehemiah in our study. We're just going to be going through Ezra, which now I'm wondering if we should, but I think it's a good thing to tackle this. And so what I want to do now is I'm going to continue my I guess you could say torture by bringing over a messianic Jewish translation called the Tree of Life for this time together. Let's jump into this here. And I just realized I don't have this done right. It's been a while, folks. You have to forgive me. We'll have to, well, here, let's just do it this way. I think it'll work. So let's go with this. So this is Ezra 1, reading from the Tree of Life version, which hopefully it's okay to do this. I know there's some that have copyright things and things like that, but I'm hoping that this one's going to be okay. So if not, please accept my sincere apologies. So Ezra 1, Tree of Life version. Cyrus decrees, rebuild the temple. Now, in the first year of King Cyrus of Persia, in order to accomplish the word of Adonai from the mouth of Jeremiah. Adonai stirred up the spirit of King Cyrus of Persia to make a proclamation throughout his entire kingdom, announcing in a written edict, saying, "Thus says King Cyrus of Persia, Adonai, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth." Wow. "He has appointed me to build a house for him in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Whoever's among you from all his people, may his God be with him. May his God be with him. May go up to Jerusalem." Oh, I see. That's like a, what do you call that? I actually don't know what the phrase is, but it's read differently. So let me do 3 over again. "Whoever is among you from all his people, may God be with him, may go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and build the houses of Adonai, the God of Israel. He is the God who is in Jerusalem. As for anyone who remains, wherever they may be living, let the people of those places supply him with the silver and gold, with goods and livestock, and with free will offerings for the house of God in Jerusalem." So the patriarchal leaders of Judah and Benjamin, along with the Kohanim and the Levites, everyone whose spirit God had stirred up, arose to go to build the house of Adonai in Jerusalem. I just find it fascinating when you have Adonai and God and he or him, and it's not always consistent in that way. So it's very interesting to me when that happens. So there's a term of endearment almost, or of admiration. Yahweh is another way I've seen that, where it's like Lord, that sort of thing. So this translation uses that in that way, apparently. So that's cool. Verse 6, "All of those around them strengthened their hands with vessels of silver, gold, and goods, cattle, and valuable gifts. Besides, all that was willingly offered. Then King Cyrus brought out the vessels from the house of Adonai that Nebuchadnezzar had brought from Jerusalem and placed it in the house of his gods." Interesting. King Cyrus of Persia had them brought out by Mithridath, the treasurer, who counted them out for Sheshbazzar, the price of Judah. This was the inventory of them: gold basins 30, silver basins 1,000, silver utensils 29, gold bowls 30, other silver bowls 410, other vessels 1,000. In all, there were 5,400 vessels of gold and silver. My math's a little fuzzy here, but we're going to let it go. Sheshbazzar brought them all, along with the exiles, were brought up from Babylon to Jerusalem. Okay, then. So we have like a bit of a, well, I'm a practitioner of the DISC personality profile, and so we've got ourselves a C that loves to have accuracy and thoroughness in their writing, and so we've gotten that. So I do find it interesting that King Cyrus of Persia is given all the world by God, according to his words, and that's not disputed necessarily. But yeah, I don't know if that's intentional or not, but because that was obviously, well, for one, it wasn't true, and the other part of that was that, you know, obviously this is a releasing of his rights to that, I guess you could say, and so very interesting. Also, the fact that there's a notice that there are other lowercase g gods being worshipped here as well. Still, even though Adonai, the God of heaven, has given him all the kings of the earth, he acknowledges that. But I guess that might not have been uncommon for some of the other people in the world to acknowledge multiple gods and just say, okay, this one of the many that I acknowledge, you know, that sort of thing. And so the Israelites would have been very specific about that there is one God, and that they had that, you know, oftentimes tattooed on their on their arms, like that there is, you know, there's only one God, and Adonai is his name, kind of thing. You know, it's like this is very specific. And so, and I can't remember what the exact phrase was, so maybe somebody will put that in the comments for me or whatever. But yeah, so we have this situation where now all of a sudden, go. Go. So it's very, very, very interesting to me that this is just kind of sudden, I guess, in the because this is the first year of King Cyrus. So very fascinating stuff. So what I'll do here is close out for today. I'll have some interesting more stuff for you tomorrow, I'm sure. I hope. If not, then we'll just play this by ear. I'm really hoping to be able to just do 10 of these, schedule hopefully permitting. I think this will all be, you know, not live. They'll be recorded, obviously. But yeah. In any event, do be blessed by the best, and then go be a blessing to all the rest. Love you guys, and we will see you here next time.